The research station orbiting Kepler 442b hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced alien technology. Dr. Zixthera, the Confederation's leading xenopsychologist, stood before a massive viewing screen displaying the blue-green planet below. Her forearms moved gracefully as she manipulated holographic data streams, her crystalline skin shifting from pale blue to deep purple, a sign of intense concentration among her species. "The Veltar, subject arrived safely," announced her assistant, clicking his mandibles in the traditional Veltar greeting. "The human is conscious and showing no signs of distress from the transportation." Zixthera's large, multifaceted eyes reflected the data scrolling past. For 3 cycles, she had studied the reports coming from the Outer Rim territories. Humans, a species that had appeared seemingly from nowhere, were causing unprecedented disruption across the galaxy. Not through violence or conquest, but through something far more disturbing: their complete immunity to psychic influence. Every known species in the Confederation possessed some level of psychic ability. The Veltar could read surface thoughts and project emotions. The gas-dwelling Nethys could manipulate memory itself. The machine hybrid Corax could interface directly with electronic systems through thought alone. These abilities formed the foundation of galactic civilization, enabling instant communication, universal translation, and diplomatic understanding across species barriers. Then came the humans. Reports described beings who operated massive warships without a single psychic interface. They communicated through primitive sound waves and visual symbols. Most unsettling of all, they seemed completely unaware that other species were constantly reading their thoughts and emotions. They simply didn't react to psychic probes that should have been impossible to ignore. "Dr. Zixthera," her assistant continued, "the human appears to be examining the holding chamber with great interest. Should we begin the standard first contact protocols?" She turned away from the screen, her skin now pulsing with yellow streaks. Anticipation mixed with scientific curiosity. "No, we proceed directly to psychic analysis. This specimen was selected specifically because it demonstrates the typical human behavioral patterns our field agents observed. Military background, strategic thinking, emotional stability. If we can understand how one human mind functions, we can develop countermeasures for the entire species." The corridor leading to the examination chamber stretched longer than necessary, a design feature meant to intimidate subjects and make them more susceptible to psychic influence. As they walked, Zixthera reviewed the human's file one more time. Commander Sarah Chen, 42 standard years old, former tactical officer aboard the human vessel Defiance, captured during a routine patrol near the Antares cluster after her ship suffered mechanical failure. "Doctor," her assistant hesitated, "the preliminary scans show unusual neural activity. The human brain appears to be louder than expected." Zixthera paused mid-step. In 30 years of xenopsychology, she had never heard that particular description. "Explain." "The electromagnetic readings from the subject's cranium exceed normal parameters for any known species. It's as if multiple thought processes are running simultaneously at extremely high intensity." "Interesting. Perhaps this explained human unpredictability in tactical situations." Her skin shifted to a confident orange. "All the more reason to proceed quickly. If human minds are simply more active than others, our enhanced psychic amplifiers should easily overcome any natural resistance." The examination chamber was a perfect sphere, lined with psychic conductive materials that could amplify telepathic abilities 100-fold. At its center sat the human, secured to a chair but not restrained. Standard protocol dictated making subjects as comfortable as possible before psychic contact. Fear and stress could create mental barriers that complicated reading. "Commander." Chen looked exactly as the reports described. Bipedal, approximately 2 meters tall, covered in the flexible outer layer humans called skin. Her facial features were arranged in the typical human pattern, with 2 forward-facing eyes that tracked movement with predatory precision. Most notably, her expression showed no sign of the glazed compliance that usually resulted from low-level psychic influence. "Fascinating," Zixthera murmured, activating the chamber's recording systems. "Subject appears completely unaffected by the passive psychic field that should be inducing mild sedation." She moved to the primary control console, her forearms dancing across the interface with practiced ease. The psychic amplification systems came online with a soft harmonic tone. Through the transparent aluminum barrier, she could see the human turning her head to look directly at the observation deck. "Can you hear me?" Commander Chen asked, her voice clear and steady through the communication system. Zixthera's skin flickered with surprise. Most subjects at this stage were barely conscious. Remarkable. The human appears to be attempting communication despite the psychic suppression field. She activated the translation matrix and spoke into the chamber. "I am Dr. Zixthera of the Veltar Confederation. You are aboard our research station for scientific observation. You will not be harmed if you cooperate." The human leaned back in her chair and something unexpected happened. Her mouth curved upward at the corners, an expression the cultural database identified as a smile. But the accompanying data suggested this was not a friendly gesture. "Let me guess," Commander Chen said. "You're going to try to read my mind now." The casual tone sent ripples of unease through Zixthera's psychic senses. This was not how first contact scenarios were supposed to proceed. Subjects should be confused, frightened, or at minimum curious about their situation. This human seemed almost amused. "Your species lacks psychic ability," Zixthera replied carefully. "The process will simply allow us to understand your thoughts and intentions. It is standard procedure for all new species." "Right." The human's smile widened. "Here's the thing, Doc. You might want to reconsider that plan." Zixthera's skin shifted to a deep red, irritation mixed with growing concern. The human's confidence was unsettling, but she had spent decades perfecting her psychic techniques. No mind could resist a properly executed probe, especially with the amplification systems at full power. "Begin recording," she announced to her assistant, initiating primary psychic contact with human subject. She placed all four hands on the control interface and opened her mind to the amplified psychic field. The familiar sensation of expanded consciousness washed over her as her telepathic abilities magnified beyond their normal limits. Through the field, she reached out toward the human's mind, expecting to encounter the usual surface thoughts, confusion, fear, scattered memories. Instead, she touched something that defied every principle of xenopsychology she had ever learned. The human mind wasn't simply active, it was a hurricane of simultaneous thoughts. Memories, calculations, and emotions all operating at impossible speeds. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that every single thought process seemed to be aware of her presence and was actively responding to her intrusion. "Commander." Chen's smile never wavered as her voice echoed through both the communication system and directly into Zixthera's mind. "I tried to warn you." The moment Dr. Zixthera's consciousness touched the human mind, she realized her catastrophic mistake. What she had interpreted as simple neural activity was actually something far more complex and terrifying. The human brain wasn't just thinking, it was thinking about thinking, analyzing its own thought processes, running multiple scenarios simultaneously, and somehow maintaining awareness of all these parallel streams at once. Commander Chen's mind was like diving into a star. Every thought blazed with intensity that should have been impossible for biological neural networks. But worse than the sheer volume was the organization. The human wasn't experiencing random mental chaos. Every thought was categorized, cross-referenced, and connected to vast networks of memory and experience. Zixthera tried to pull back, but the psychic amplifiers had locked her consciousness into the connection. Standard protocol required maintaining contact for a minimum of 60 seconds to gather baseline data. What felt like an eternity had been only 12 seconds. Through the mental link, she sensed Commander Chen's amusement growing stronger. The human was actually enjoying this. "You know," Chen's voice echoed both audibly and directly through the psychic connection. "Your people really should have done more research before trying this. But I guess that's the problem with being psychic. You assume everyone else works the same way you do." Zixthera fought to maintain professional composure despite the growing pressure in her mind. Through the connection, she was beginning to understand something horrible about human consciousness. They didn't just think in words or images like other species. They thought in everything simultaneously. Mathematical equations, emotional associations, sensory memories, hypothetical scenarios, song lyrics, tactical assessments, and abstract concepts all flowing together in an endless stream. "Fascinating," Chen continued, and Zixthera could feel the human actively examining her presence in her mind. "So you're Veltar, crystal-based consciousness with distributed neural pathways. That explains the multiple arms. You need them to interface with the quantum processing centers in your torso. Impressive evolution, but it makes you vulnerable to cognitive overload. The casual analysis sent ice through Zixthera's veins. How could the human know so much about Veltar biology? More importantly, how is she analyzing Zixthera's mind while being psychically probed herself? Dr. Zixthera, her assistant's voice came through the communication system, barely audible over the growing harmonic resonance from the amplifiers. Your bioreadings are showing dangerous stress levels. Should I terminate the connection? She couldn't respond. Speaking would require shifting her concentration away from maintaining the psychic link, and she was beginning to suspect that would be a very bad idea. Through the connection, she felt Commander Chen's mind shift into what could only be described as a teaching mode. Let me explain something about human consciousness, Chen said, her mental voice taking on the tone of a patient instructor. We don't just think. We think about our thinking. We analyze our own thought processes, question our own assumptions, and run constant background checks on our own mental state. What you're experiencing right now, this is just the surface level. The revelation hit Zixthera like a physical blow. Human metacognition, their ability to think about thinking itself, wasn't just an interesting quirk. It was a form of natural psychic defense. Every time she tried to read a specific thought, the human mind automatically generated dozens of related thoughts, memories, and associations. It was like trying to catch a single fish in a stream by grabbing the entire river. But here's the really interesting part, Chen continued, and Zixthera felt her mental presence shift deeper into dangerous territory. Humans don't just have metacognition. We have meta-metacognition. We think about thinking, and we can keep adding layers indefinitely. The psychic amplifiers began emitting a high-pitched whine. Zixthera's assistant was shouting something about system overload, but the words seemed to come from very far away. She was trapped in a recursive loop of human consciousness that grew more complex with every passing second. Through the connection, she began to sense the true scope of what she had attempted. The human mind wasn't just protected by its complexity, it was protected by its own curiosity. The moment Commander Chen realized she was being psychically probed, she had instinctively begun probing back. Not with psychic abilities, which humans clearly lacked, but with the same analytical processes they use to understand everything else. You know what the really funny part is? Chen asked, and her mental laughter was like standing inside a thunderstorm. Your entire galactic civilization is built on psychic abilities, but you've never encountered a species that evolved to defend against them. Humans developed metacognition as a survival trait. We had to think about our own thinking to outsmart predators, plan for complex social situations, and solve abstract problems. Zixthera felt her own consciousness beginning to fragment under the assault of human mental architecture. The amplifiers were feeding back impossible amounts of data, not because the human mind was resisting, but because it was actively engaging. Commander Chen was thinking faster and more efficiently than the Veltar computer systems could process. Every time you try to read one of my thoughts, Chen explained, I automatically generate 7 more related thoughts. When you try to read those, I generate 49 more. It's exponential. The deeper you go, the more complex it becomes. And the best part? I'm not even doing it consciously. This is just how human minds work. The implications crashed over Zixthera like a tidal wave. If this was true, if every human possessed this level of natural psychic defense, then the entire foundation of Confederation superiority was built on an illusion. For millennia, they had dominated other species through psychic influence and mental control. But humans were immune not because they were psychically null, but because their minds were too complex to control. Dr. Zixthera, her assistant's voice was distant and distorted. The amplifiers are approaching critical failure. Your neural pathways are showing severe strain. She wanted to disconnect, but Commander Chen's mind had become a gravitational well of complexity that drew her deeper with every passing moment. The human wasn't trying to trap her. She was simply being herself, and that was more than enough. I should probably mention, Chen said conversationally, that I'm actually holding back quite a bit. See, humans don't just think about our present situation. We're constantly running background processes about the past, planning for multiple possible futures, maintaining awareness of our physical state, processing emotional context, and analyzing social dynamics. What you're experiencing right now is maybe 10% of normal human mental activity. The number hit Zixathera like a physical blow, 10%. If this overwhelming storm of consciousness was only a fraction of human mental capacity, then her people had been making plans based on completely false assumptions about human limitations. The thing is, Chen continued, I've been curious about your psychic abilities since my ship was captured. So while you're trying to read my mind, I'm analyzing exactly how your telepathy works. Quantum entanglement through crystalline neural structures, limited bandwidth, vulnerability to cognitive feedback loops. It's actually quite elegant, but not very robust. Zixthera realized with growing horror that the human was reverse engineering Veltar's psychic abilities in real time, using nothing but observation and analysis. No psychic powers, no advanced technology, just the terrifying efficiency of human pattern recognition and logical deduction. The amplifiers shrieked as they hit their safety limits and began an automatic shutdown sequence. As the psychic connection wavered and collapsed, Zixthera caught one final thought from Commander Chen's mind. Now I understand how your people work. The question is, what am I going to do with that information? Dr. Zixathera collapsed to the deck of the observation chamber, her crystalline skin flickering between colors so rapidly it created a strobe effect. Her forearms spasmed uncontrollably, as her neural pathways struggled to process the overload of information from the terminated psychic connection. Purple fluid, the Veltar equivalent of blood, seeped from the sensory crystals embedded in her forehead. Medical emergency. Her assistant shouted into the communication system while rushing to her side. Dr. Zixthera has suffered severe psychic trauma. I need a neural stabilization team immediately. Through the transparent aluminum barrier, Commander Chen remained calmly seated in her chair, watching the chaos in the observation deck with obvious interest. Her expression showed neither concern nor satisfaction, just the analytical focus of someone studying a fascinating scientific phenomenon. Is she going to be all right? Chen asked through the communication system, her tone genuinely curious. The assistant looked up from where he knelt beside Zixthera's convulsing form, his mandibles clicking in agitation. Why do you care? You caused this. Actually, I didn't, Chen replied matter-of-factly. Your doctor caused this by attempting a psychic probe on a species she didn't understand. I tried to warn her it was a bad idea. I even held back as much as I could once the connection was established. 3 medical technicians burst into the observation chamber, carrying specialized equipment designed for Veltar neural emergencies. As they worked to stabilize Zixthera's brain chemistry, the assistant found himself staring at the human with a mixture of fear and fascination. What exactly are you? He whispered. Chen tilted her head thoughtfully. That's an interesting question. From your perspective, I suppose I'm a cognitive anomaly. From my perspective, I'm just a normal human being. The problem is that your entire galactic civilization has never encountered a species that evolved natural defenses against psychic intrusion. The lead medical technician looked up from his readings. Her neural pathways are severely damaged. It will take cycles of therapy to repair the cognitive scarring. What exactly happened during the probe? The assistant struggled to find words that could adequately describe what he had witnessed through the monitoring systems. The human mind? It was like watching someone try to contain a supernova with a butterfly net. Every thought led to 10 more thoughts, which led to 100 more. The complexity increased exponentially until our systems couldn't process the data flow. Chen nodded approvingly. That's actually a pretty good analogy. Human consciousness is highly recursive. We don't just think, we think about our thinking, then think about our thinking. It creates layers of complexity that can trap external psychic probes in infinite loops. But how is that possible? The assistant asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. No biological neural network should be capable of that level of parallel processing. You're making the same mistake your doctor made, Chen explained patiently. You're assuming that bigger or more complex automatically means better. Human brains aren't more powerful than other species' minds. They're just organized differently. We evolved to solve problems through analytical thinking rather than psychic intuition. As the medical team stabilized Zixthera and prepared to transport her to the medical bay, Chen continued her impromptu lecture. Here's what really happened during that probe. Your doctor tried to read my surface thoughts. But human surface thoughts are constantly connected to deeper thoughts, which are connected to memories, which are connected to emotional associations, which are connected to abstract concepts, and so on. She got caught in the web of human consciousness. The assistant watched the medical team carry his unconscious colleague away, then turned back to study the human with new respect and wariness. "Are all humans like you?" "Pretty much," Chen said with a slight smile. "I'm actually fairly typical. Military training gave me better emotional control and tactical thinking skills. But the basic cognitive architecture is standard human design. Any human you tried to probe would cause similar problems, though the specific pattern would be different." This revelation sent chills through the assistant's crystalline structure. If one human could accidentally overload their most advanced psychic amplification systems, what would happen when human military forces realized the extent of their natural immunity to Confederation technology? "There's something else you should know," Chen continued, and her expression grew more serious. "While your doctor was trying to read my mind, I was analyzing her psychic abilities. Human pattern recognition is quite good, and I learned a lot about how Veltar telepathy works." The assistant's skin shifted to a pale, frightened blue. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I now understand the quantum resonance frequencies your species uses for psychic communication. I know how your neural crystals interface with electromagnetic fields. I understand the bandwidth limitations of your telepathic networks." Chen paused, letting the implications sink in. "More importantly, I understand how to disrupt them." The observation chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. The assistant stared at the human, realizing that what had begun as a routine scientific examination had become something far more dangerous. "You're not going to share this information, are you?" he asked hopefully. Chen's smile returned, but it was different now, more calculating. "That depends entirely on what happens next. See, I was captured while my ship was conducting a peaceful survey mission. My crew is probably listed as missing in action, which means a search and rescue operation is likely already underway." The assistant's mandibles clicked nervously. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Human military doctrine is quite specific about protecting captured personnel," Chen explained. "When they find this station, and they will find it, they're going to want their people back. How that negotiation goes will determine whether my knowledge of Veltar psychic vulnerabilities remains a private matter or becomes widely distributed throughout human space." The implications crashed over the assistant like a tidal wave. The Confederation's entire military and political structure depended on psychic superiority. If humans could neutralize those abilities, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift dramatically overnight. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Right now, I want to talk to whoever's in command of this station," Chen replied. "Your doctor tried to probe my mind without consent, which violated several interstellar treaties regarding prisoner treatment. But I'm willing to discuss this situation diplomatically before it escalates." The assistant looked around the observation chamber, suddenly aware that the human had somehow shifted from being a test subject to being a negotiator with significant leverage. I'll contact Station Commander Velcon immediately." "Good choice," Chen said approvingly. "And while you're at it, you might want to check on Dr. Zixithera's condition. Human minds have a way of leaving lasting impressions on people who try to probe them uninvited." As the assistant hurried to make contact with the station commander, Chen settled back in her chair and began planning her next moves. The Confederation had made the mistake of assuming that psychic abilities automatically conferred superiority over non-psychic species. Now she had the opportunity to demonstrate just how wrong that assumption was. But first, she needed to make sure her captors understood that capturing a human came with consequences they had never considered. The real question was whether they would be smart enough to negotiate while they still had the chance. Station Commander Velcon materialized in the observation chamber through the Veltar transport system, his imposing 3-meter frame crackling with bioelectric energy. Unlike the research staff, military Veltar had evolved enhanced combat capabilities, thicker crystalline armor, more powerful psychic projection abilities, and neural systems designed to resist mental interference. His skin maintained a steady deep red, the color of controlled aggression. "Human," he said, his voice resonating through both the communication system and a low-level psychic broadcast, meant to induce submission. "You have seriously injured one of our most valuable researchers. Explain yourself." Commander Chen looked up at the towering alien with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the crisis. "Commander Velcon, I presume?" I'm Commander Sarah Chen, United Earth Navy. Your researcher attempted an unauthorized psychic probe on a prisoner of war, which violated the Galactic Convention on Sentient Rights. The injury she sustained was an unfortunate consequence of her own actions. Velkon's bioelectric field flared brighter. You dare cite galactic law to me? Your species isn't even a recognized member of the Confederation. You have no legal standing here. Actually, I do, Chen replied, and her tone remained conversational despite the obvious threat. Article 7 of the Galactic Convention states that any species demonstrating sapience and spaceflight capability has automatic protection under prisoner of war statutes, regardless of Confederation membership status. The treaty was specifically designed to prevent situations like this. The station commander's confidence wavered slightly. The human's knowledge of galactic law was unexpected, but more disturbing was her complete immunity to his psychic intimidation field. Every other species showed at least some response to Veltar mental pressure. Submission, fear, confusion, something. This human seemed utterly unaffected. Furthermore, Chen continued, I should point out that my ship's destruction was not an act of war. We experienced a mechanical failure in what we believed to be neutral space. Taking advantage of a distress situation to capture crew members is considered piracy under galactic law. Velkon's skin shifted to a darker red. Your ship was armed. Our sensors detected military-grade weapon systems. My ship was a survey vessel with standard defensive armaments, Chen corrected. The same classification as this research station, which I notice has quite impressive shielding and defensive capabilities. For a supposedly peaceful facility, the station commander found himself in the uncomfortable position of having his own arguments used against him. Worse, the human's logical consistency was impeccable. Every point she made was legally sound and tactically relevant. What do you want? He asked finally. Chen smiled, and Velkon felt a chill run through his crystalline structure despite his inability to read her intentions. I want to demonstrate something that your people need to understand before this situation escalates further. What kind of demonstration? I want you to try to read my mind. The request was so unexpected that Velkon actually stepped backward. What? You heard me correctly? Chen said, her smile widening. You're military, which means you have enhanced psychic abilities compared to the research staff. You probably think you can succeed where Dr. Zix Thera failed. I'm giving you permission to try. Velkon's combat instincts screamed warnings. No prisoner had ever volunteered for psychic interrogation. The human's confidence suggested either complete ignorance of what she was offering, or knowledge of something that made the attempt futile. This could be a trap, he said. Of course it's a trap, Chen agreed cheerfully. The question is whether you're smart enough to recognize what kind of trap it is before you spring it. The challenge struck at the core of Veltar military pride. Velkon had spent decades perfecting his psychic abilities, had broken the mental defenses of dozens of enemy agents, had never encountered a mind he couldn't crack given sufficient motivation. Very well, he said, moving to the control console, but understand that military-grade psychic interrogation is far more intense than the research probe you experienced. If you're hiding something, I will find it. Chen's expression grew serious. Commander, I'm going to give you one piece of advice before you begin. When you realize you're in trouble, disconnect immediately. Don't try to fight through it. Don't attempt to maintain the connection out of pride. Just pull back as fast as possible. Dr. Zix Thera's injuries occurred because she was locked into the amplification system. You have manual override capability. Use it. The warning only reinforced Velkon's determination to prove human mental defenses could be overcome through superior skill and power. He activated the military-grade psychic amplifiers, systems designed for combat interrogation rather than scientific research. The harmonic resonance filled the chamber with a sound like crystalline bells. Last chance to reconsider, Chen said. Velkon opened his enhanced military consciousness and struck at the human mind with the force of a psychic battering ram. Where Dr. Zixathera had attempted a gentle probe, he launched a full-scale mental assault designed to shatter enemy defenses and expose hidden information. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. Commander, Chen's mind didn't just resist the assault, it absorbed it, analyzed it, and reflected it back with compound interest. Velkon found himself caught in the same recursive loop that had trapped the research team, but magnified by the intensity of his own attack. But this time was different. This time Chen was ready for the psychic contact, and she had spent the intervening hours thinking about the nature of Veltar telepathy. As Velkon's consciousness crashed into the labyrinth of human thought, Chen began her own form of interrogation. Interesting. Her voice echoed through both audio and psychic channels. Military Veltar consciousness is more structured than research variants. Hierarchical command pathways, tactical analysis subroutines, threat assessment protocols running in background mode. You've been enhanced through biotechnology. Those aren't natural developments. Velkon tried to pull back, but the human mind had become a cognitive quicksand that drew him deeper with every attempt to escape. Through the connection, he felt Chen systematically mapping his neural architecture with the same analytical precision she might use to study a complex engineering problem. Combat enhancement surgery, Chen continued, her mental voice maddeningly calm. Neural pathway reinforcement, psychic amplification implants, emotional suppression conditioning. Very thorough, but it makes you vulnerable to cognitive feedback. Your natural mental flexibility has been traded for raw power. The station commander triggered the emergency disconnect, but found that his enhanced psychic abilities were working against him. The very improvements that made him more powerful also made him less adaptable. His mind was locked into the connection like a key turned too hard in a lock. The really fascinating thing, Chen said, is that I can see the command structure of your entire military organization through your enhanced neural pathways. Fleet deployment, strategic planning protocols, chain of command hierarchies. It's all right there in your enhanced consciousness. Velkon's skin flashed through every color in the Veltar spectrum as panic override his military conditioning. Through the psychic link, he felt the human consciousness cataloging military secrets with ruthless efficiency. Don't worry, Chen assured him. I'm not interested in your military intelligence, but I am learning quite a bit about Veltar enhancement technology. Did you know that your psychic implants have a critical vulnerability? All I would need to do is broadcast a specific electromagnetic frequency, and every enhanced Veltar within range would experience immediate neural cascade failure. The implications hit Velkon like a physical blow. If humans could disrupt Veltar's psychic enhancement technology, the military advantages the Confederation had maintained for centuries would evaporate overnight. I'm going to disconnect now, Chen announced. Remember what I told you about pulling back immediately when you realize you're in trouble? This is that moment. The psychic connection severed abruptly, leaving Velkon gasping on the deck of the observation chamber. Unlike Dr. Zixathera, he had disconnected before suffering permanent damage, but the experience had fundamentally altered his understanding of human capabilities. Now, Chen said as the station commander struggled to his feet, are you ready to discuss this situation like rational beings? Or do you need to call in more volunteers for demonstration purposes? Commander Velkon sat heavily in the observation chair, his crystalline skin cycling through muted colors as he processed what had just occurred. The human remained calmly seated in the examination chamber, watching him with the patient expression of someone waiting for a student to understand a particularly important lesson. You could have destroyed my mind completely, Velkon said finally, his voice lacking its earlier arrogance. Why didn't you? Chen shrugged. Because I'm not a monster, Commander. I'm a military officer who found herself in an unfortunate situation. My goal isn't to cause harm, it's to resolve this incident before it escalates into something much worse. Worse how? Let me paint you a picture, Chen said, leaning forward slightly. Right now you have one human prisoner who knows how to disrupt Veltar psychic abilities. In approximately 18 hours, a human search and rescue fleet will arrive at this location. That fleet will include Marines, tactical specialists, and intelligence officers, all of whom will be very interested in learning about what happened to their missing comrade. Velkon's skin shifted to a worried pale blue. How can you be so certain they'll find us? Because you underestimate human technology the same way you underestimated human psychology, Chen explained. We don't rely on psychic abilities for navigation, communication, or tactical coordination. Our ships use quantum entanglement beacons, gravitational wave detection, and something your people have never encountered, artificial intelligence. The station commander's confusion was obvious. Artificial intelligence is forbidden by galactic law. The AI wars of the Third Epoch were caused by psychic species trying to create artificial telepaths, Chen interrupted. Humans never had psychic abilities, so our AI development followed completely different principles. Our artificial intelligences aren't trying to achieve consciousness or psychic powers, they're just very sophisticated. Tools designed to solve specific problems. Velcon felt the foundations of his worldview continuing to crumble. What kind of problems? Oh, little things like tracking ion signatures across interstellar distances, analyzing patrol patterns, and calculating the most likely locations for secret research facilities. Chen's smile was distinctly predatory now. The AI aboard my ship recorded everything right up until the moment we were captured. By now, it's transmitted our location to the nearest human naval base, along with a complete tactical analysis of this station's capabilities. The implications sent chills through Velcon's enhanced neural pathways. Confederation military doctrine assumed that capturing enemy personnel would prevent intelligence from reaching hostile forces. The concept of automated systems continuing to operate independently after crew capture had never been considered. But there's something else you need to understand, Chen continued. Human military doctrine includes very specific protocols for dealing with psychic species. We've been preparing for first contact with telepathic aliens for decades. Preparing how? Chen's expression grew serious. Every human military vessel carries specialized equipment designed to disrupt psychic abilities. Neural scramblers, electromagnetic pulse generators, quantum noise broadcasters, all calibrated specifically to interfere with the types of psychic phenomena we've detected in our exploration of galaxy. Velcon's skin flashed a bright yellow, the color of pure terror among his species. You've been studying us? We've been studying everyone, Chen corrected. Humans are naturally paranoid about potential threats. When we detected signs of galactic civilization, our first priority was understanding how psychic species might try to control or manipulate us. We've been analyzing intercepted communications, studying abandoned technology, and developing countermeasures for decades. The revelation struck Velcon like a physical blow. While the Confederation had been dismissing humans as primitive non-psychics, humans had been systematically preparing for psychic warfare. The search and rescue fleet that's coming for me includes a full psychological warfare complement, Chen continued. Neural disruptors that can incapacitate psychic species at range, quantum jammers that prevent telepathic communication, and specialist troops trained specifically for anti-psychic operations. Velcon found his voice with difficulty. What do you want from us? I want you to make the smart choice, Chen replied. In a few hours you can either face a human military force that's prepared for everything you can throw at them, or you can resolve this situation diplomatically. What kind of resolution? Chen settled back in her chair, clearly switching into negotiation mode. First, I want Dr. Zixathera to receive the best possible medical treatment. Her injuries were caused by her own actions, but I don't want permanent harm to come to her. Velcon nodded quickly. Of course. Our medical team is already working on neural reconstruction therapy. Second, I want formal acknowledgement that the capture of my crew violated galactic law. My ship was in distress, and taking advantage of that situation for research purposes was an act of piracy. The station commander's skin cycled through several colors as he considered the legal implications. Such an acknowledgement would require approval from the High Command. Then contact them, Chen said simply, because the alternative is explaining to the High Command why this station was destroyed by a human military force. You're threatening us? I'm explaining consequences, Chen corrected. The human military doesn't negotiate with pirates. If this situation isn't resolved diplomatically before they arrive, they'll classify it as a hostile action and respond. Accordingly, Velcon realized he was trapped between the impossibility of explaining human immunity to psychic control and the approaching reality of human military intervention. What else? Third, I want a formal exchange of diplomatic representatives. Humans and the Confederation are going to have to coexist in this galaxy, which means we need to establish proper communication channels and mutual understanding. The suggestion was actually reasonable, which somehow made it more threatening. Chen wasn't demanding revenge or making impossible requests. She was proposing a framework for ongoing relations that acknowledged human independence from Confederation control. And finally, Chen continued, I want assurance that no other human vessels or personnel will be captured for research purposes. What happened here was the result of dangerous ignorance about human psychology. That ignorance could have gotten people killed. Velkan considered the terms carefully. They were surprisingly moderate, given the level of leverage the human clearly possessed. And in exchange? In exchange, my knowledge of Veltar's psychic vulnerabilities remains classified information restricted to human military intelligence, Chen said. I won't share details about your enhancement technology or defensive weaknesses with civilian authorities or other species. The offer was better than Velkan had any right to expect. Chen could easily have demanded military intelligence, territorial concessions, or technology transfers. Instead, she was proposing a solution that allowed both species to maintain their dignity while establishing a framework for future relations. I'll need to contact the High Command immediately, Velkan said. Of course, Chen agreed. But Commander? I'd recommend being very honest about what happened here. Human pattern recognition is quite good, and we don't respond well to deception. The search and rescue fleet includes intelligence specialists who will be able to determine exactly what occurred on this station. As Velkan prepared to make the most difficult report of his career, he found himself grudgingly respecting the human's tactical and diplomatic skills. She had turned a capture scenario into a negotiating position, demonstrated superior capabilities without causing unnecessary harm, and offered terms that served everyone's interests. For the first time since humans had appeared in the galaxy, a Confederation officer was beginning to understand that these newcomers might not be the primitive, non-psychics they appeared to be. They might be something far more dangerous and far more valuable as allies than enemies. The High Command's response came faster than Velkan had expected, materializing as a full holographic presence in the station's communication chamber. Supreme Commander Tekvar, the highest-ranking military officer in the Veltar Confederation, appeared as a towering figure of crystalline authority, his forearms moving in complex patterns that indicated extreme displeasure. Explain, was all he said, but the single word carried enough psychic weight to make lesser Veltar collapse in submission. Velkan straightened his posture and began the most difficult briefing of his career. Supreme Commander, we have discovered that human mental architecture is fundamentally incompatible with our psychic abilities. Attempts to probe human consciousness result in cognitive feedback that can cause severe neural damage to our personnel. Incompatible how? Human minds operate on recursive thought patterns that create exponential complexity when subjected to psychic analysis, Velkan explained, trying to find words for concepts that had no equivalent in Veltar language. They think about their own thinking processes, which creates loops of increasing mental activity that overload our neural systems. Tekvar's skin shifted to the deep purple of skepticism. You're telling me that one primitive non-psychic species has mental defenses superior to our military-grade psychic amplifiers? Not defenses, Supreme Commander. Architecture. Human consciousness isn't designed to resist psychic probes. It's designed in a way that makes such probes impossible. They have natural cognitive immunity. The Supreme Commander's image flickered as his real body, hundreds of light years away, processed this information. Show me the medical reports on our injured personnel. Velkan transmitted Dr. Zixthera's neural scans and his own post-contact analysis. The data painted a clear picture of psychic systems pushed beyond their operational limits by exposure to incompatible mental architecture. This is unprecedented, Tekvar admitted after reviewing the information. In 3,000 years of galactic expansion, we have never encountered a species immune to psychic influence. There's more, Supreme Commander, Velkan continued reluctantly. The human prisoner has analyzed our psychic abilities during the failed probes. She now understands how Veltar telepathy functions and claims to know how to disrupt it. The silence that followed was deafening. When Tekvar finally spoke, his voice carried undertones that made the station's hull vibrate. Elaborate. According to the human, our military enhancement technology has created vulnerabilities that could be exploited through electromagnetic interference. She describes the ability to cause neural cascade failures in enhanced Veltar through targeted frequency broadcasts. Tekvar's holographic form solidified as his full attention focused on the implications. Is this possible? Our technical analysis suggests it is, Velkan admitted. The enhancement implants that give us superior psychic abilities also create uniform resonance patterns that could be disrupted by external interference. What does the human want? Velkan transmitted Chen's proposed terms, watching as the Supreme Commander's skin cycled through multiple colors while he processed the diplomatic framework. These terms are surprisingly reasonable, Tekvar observed. Why is she not demanding military concessions or territorial rights? I believe, Supreme Commander, that she is thinking several moves ahead, Velkon replied. The human military force approaching this station represents only a small fraction of their capabilities. She's offering us a chance to establish proper diplomatic relations before the situation escalates beyond control. At that moment, the station's sensor arrays detected multiple quantum signatures approaching at high velocity. Velkon's communications officer announced through the intercom. Commander, we have incoming vessels. 7 ships, human configuration, ETA 14 minutes. Tekvar's expression hardened, faster than you predicted. Human technology operates on different principles than ours, Velkon explained. They use artificial intelligence for navigation and tactical coordination, which allows for much more efficient fleet movements. Put me in contact with their commanding officer. Within minutes, the communication chamber filled with the holographic image of a stern-faced human woman wearing what appeared to be military dress. Her rank insignia identified her as an admiral, and her expression suggested someone accustomed to getting results through direct action. I am Admiral Rebecca Torres, United Earth Navy, she announced without preamble. I understand you have one of my officers aboard this station. Admiral Torres, Tekvar replied formally. I am Supreme Commander Tekvar of the Veltar Confederation. We are prepared to discuss the situation regarding your officer. Good, Torres said, though her tone suggested she was prepared for less diplomatic outcomes, because if anything has happened to Commander Chen, this conversation is going to become very unpleasant very quickly. Your officer is unharmed, Tekvar assured her. However, there have been complications that require careful handling. What kind of complications? Velkon stepped forward. Admiral, we attempted to conduct psychic analysis of your officer's mental state, as is standard procedure for first contact scenarios. The results were unexpected and led to injuries among our research staff. Admiral Torres's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she had been expecting this news. I see. And what did you learn from this experience? That human mental architecture is fundamentally incompatible with psychic analysis, Tekvar replied. Your species appears to have natural immunity to telepathic abilities. We know, Torres said simply. We've been monitoring galactic communications for years. We're aware that most species in this region rely heavily on psychic abilities for communication and control. We've been preparing for this type of contact. The casual revelation sent chills through both Veltar commanders. The humans had been preparing for psychic contact while the Confederation had been completely unaware of human existence. Admiral, Tekvar said carefully, your officer has proposed terms for resolving this incident diplomatically. Are you authorized to negotiate on behalf of your government? I am, Torres confirmed. And I'm prepared to honor any agreement Commander Chen has made, provided she's been treated according to the standards of galactic law. Over the next 2 hours, the 3 commanders worked out the details of what would become known as the Chen Accords, the first formal diplomatic agreement between humanity and the Veltar Confederation. The treaty established protocols for future contact, recognized human immunity to psychic control as a natural defense rather than a hostile act, and created a framework for mutual cooperation in exploring the galaxy. Dr. Zixthera, recovered enough to participate via neural link, provided the scientific perspective that helped both species understand how their different evolutionary paths had led to incompatible but complementary abilities. Humans had developed analytical intelligence and technological innovation in the absence of psychic abilities, while psychic species had focused on mental communication and direct consciousness manipulation. Commander, Chen was released to Admiral Torres' fleet with full honors and a formal apology for the unauthorized research attempt. As her shuttle prepared to depart the station, she made one final observation that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The galaxy is big enough for both psychic and non-psychic species, she told Velkon during their farewell meeting. But it's going to require mutual respect and understanding. Your people have capabilities that could benefit human exploration efforts, and our technology could solve problems that psychic abilities can't address. 6 months later, the first joint human Veltar exploration vessel launched from Earth's orbital shipyards. The crew included both psychic and non-psychic species working together to explore regions of space that neither could safely investigate alone. The galaxy had become a much more interesting place, and for the first time in millennia, the Confederation had encountered a species that challenged their assumptions about consciousness, intelligence, and the nature of sapient life itself. Commander Chen returned to active duty with a promotion and a new assignment: Director of Interspecies Relations, responsible for establishing contact protocols with the dozens of other psychic species that inhabited the galaxy. Her experience aboard the Veltar research station had proven that humans could not only survive in a galaxy dominated by psychic abilities, they could thrive. The age of human expansion into galactic civilization had begun, and it would be far more complex and far more rewarding than anyone had imagined.